This is the best era. The two camps fought but never broke, and the door to the new world has opened. Exploration and exploration, courage and glory are the foundation of the entire galaxy. This is the worst era. The people of Earth have forgotten the hardships and pride of the fathers of independence, and are addicted to the false prosperity of Tian and Wuxi. They are about to fall into the abyss without realizing it. This is the era before miracles, where titans shuttle through the stars, psychics roam the void, and Leviathans awaken in the shadows behind the stars. The will left by ancient times is not only a legacy, but also a test, even purification. This is the eve of the great era. The dragon girl in the morning is sleeping, the boneless goddess of wisdom with only one eye is still healthy, the female Khan who swallows the sea of stars is still dormant, and the queen with a heart full of insects is silently developing in a lewd manner. Wearing a cycle of rebirth, Yu Lian became indifferent to all of the above and decided to become a revolutionary with no emotions, completely subverting the ancient rule of spiritual nobles with the destroyers and colossal statues of laborers. Keywords of the novel. He and Their Stars have no pop-ups, He and Their Stars complete collection download, He and Their Stars latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. What is the system you are listening at novel full.audio? Chapter 1. What is the system? I have a severe dizziness, my vision is blurry, and I can't feel anything except for pain all over my body. What is captured in the ear is not only the unpleasant roar of the periosteum, but also more annoying noise and noise. However, Yu Lian felt a little happy. After all, the moment when the previous memory lingered was not very good. He somehow woke up, with a star-like radiance blooming in his eyes, and a gamma ray burst gushing out from his massive mouth that could even tear apart a titan. Based on his perception of this power as a high-level psychic and decades of experience spanning the galaxy, it can be concluded that I'm hopeless. I'm doomed. Let's wait for the next life. However, the supposed eternal silence has not arrived, which is certainly worth celebrating with champagne. So, those two kids pulled me out. Even smugglers can escape from the mouth of the Star Dragon King with this hero. Is it enough for them to blow on into the next century? It's possible. When I recover, I will teach you everything you want to learn, and I won't hide anything you want to know. He's already disabled, and indeed we still have to, a male voice said urgently. Retract the preface, the smuggler is indeed still a smuggler. 3 comrades have already died today. Sir. Yes, this is the cultivation that a smuggler with ideals, pursuits, and integrity should have. Wait, does this seem like a pretty young female voice? I don't remember that there were beautiful girls on your ship, Great Xia. Because this girl's voice is very pleasant, with a cool and slightly chilly tone, it is Yu Lian's dish, so he thinks she must be a beautiful girl. However, his power armor has been depleted, and now it's the same situation. Are you planning for us to drag him back step by step? The voice before, who was about to throw himself away, became a bit angry and frustrated. I thought this was not a question. Sir. What Yu Lian thought, the beautiful girl refused to give up. Pay attention to your attitude. Sergeant Hilika. At this point, even if it's because my head is dizzy and my intelligence and judgment have not yet recovered to 1/10 of what I usually do, I still feel that something is wrong. Sir. Sergeant Chief. I haven't dealt with military organizations for at least 5 or 6 years. Yu Lian also confirmed that if a legitimate military organization really encounters him, it will either be heartbroken or ecstatic, but this attitude cannot be the same. Perhaps eager to figure out the current situation, he felt that his eyelids didn't seem as heavy anymore and reluctantly opened them. The first thing that caught the eye was the boundless sandstone that seemed to have a golden hue. The high temperature drives the air densely covered with sand and dust to form a fog on the horizon that causes visual misalignment. Above that, there is a tile blue sky and 2 rounds of the sun, one blue and one red, like the eyes of a deity. As the saying goes, the solitary smoke in the desert is curved and straight, and the sunset over the long river is a pair of circles. That's right, Tian. Well, I'm really bored with decades of old jokes. Yu Lian was saddened by his bad taste, and then half a second later he decided he should be on the new human star, which was the earliest colonized planet developed by Earthlings in the fairy system. I am too familiar with the sand and soil here. Xan human is equivalent to the second hometown of his own second son, but it is also the name of the Earth before the Earth lost this planet. At Xinhuman, we are just outsiders who have only been here for a few years. Don't you understand? We are in danger ourselves. The person referred to as Sir by Sergeant Zillica shouted again. So your conversation is so time-traveling. What does a few years mean? Isn't this the 884th year of the galactic calendar? It has been almost half a century since humans lost this, fairy's yellow jade diamond. She had already been renamed Iron King Ling by her new owner, a tasteless Kaitai name. They're here. The third voice sounded, with a hint of panic. Yu Lian could hear the sound of rapid and heavy breathing, the friction of mechanical bones, the sound of machine springs loading bullets, and the roar of powered axes and chainsaw swords. It must be noted that all of the above made him travel through time, so he didn't feel any tension at all, just felt like he was in an absurd farce. He propped up half of his body. This action alone exhausted his energy. And quickly confirmed his condition. Yu Lian told himself that even if it's a long journey, even if it feels like every bone is trembling in pain, he must immediately grasp the current situation. This is a quality that a Freedom Knight, a 7-ring psychic, and the most powerful ranger in the entire universe must possess. He is now lying on a powered stretcher. Within a radius of 10 meters, there are more than 10 armed personnel with guns hastily lining up. It can be seen that they are indeed exhausted, and some of them are still trembling, but at least they haven't escaped. Let's say that their courage is commendable. Just standing too closely, and without the sense of hierarchy of firepower divisions. This is an early infantry tactic that has not been reformed by General Patton. It is our parallel universe's technology tree that is crooked, otherwise it would not have been the same tactical literacy in the space age. Yu Lian shook his head and sighed. Captain, are you awake? Yu Lian heard the voice of Sergeant Sharika and immediately saw her face approaching. It's unrealistic to expect a girl wrapped in a power armor covered in blood and dust, with her face covered in stains and exhaustion, to have any fragrance coming. Of course, even if they are dusty, there is no trace of embarrassment. Under their sharp golden short hair, there is a face with a clear outline, as well as a pair of fiery red eyes that, normal, Earthlings cannot have. Angry yet sharp, she is indeed a handsome and charming beauty. Sharika. Sergeant. Red eyes. This, isn't it? Yu Lian felt that he should have known each other, but it was in the news and videos. Moreover, she would never be so young. Don't worry, the soldiers of the community will never leave their comrades behind. She said strictly, checking the movements of the rifle meticulously. Community early. Well, girl, why are you wearing an AS.40 exoskeleton with only pirates and black, meow, gang working together, and holding a C-10 kinetic energy rifle that has been discontinued for almost 30 years? Is this a costume drama? Although Yu Lian really wants to say that, as a free ranger who has swept through half of the universe, he certainly understands that this is not filming. These people are really nervous, fearful, gritting their teeth to prepare for something. The space here is open, we can't be too eager to fight. Lieutenant Monsun. The initial officer, who wanted to leave himself, was still chattering incessantly, but the target changed to a middle-aged man wearing the same old type of exoskeleton. Lieutenant Monsun seemed to hesitate for a moment, but still gritted his teeth and said, "Let's completely defeat them here. Go back to your position, Lieutenant." His tone was very firm, but being too firm seemed a bit deliberate. The argument between the two officers came to an end, not because the lieutenant didn't want to continue, but because the rolling smoke and dust in their sight were getting closer and closer. Up close, even with your nose, you can smell the foul smell inside. They certainly didn't notice, but when they woke up, Yu Lian had already looked them up and down. The military rank badge on the shoulder armor has an orange background, which belongs to the station guard of the Outer Colony Star, which is not as good as the Marine Corps Gorilla. The commonly known, police miscellaneous fish, is also. As the name suggests, nature is located at the bottom of the contempt chain across all departments of the military. The military rank badge is a silver swallow pattern with a star added, and without a star added, it is indeed a lieutenant and a second lieutenant. As for the young sergeant next to her, she has a thick copper bar and a double sword cross emblem, and of course, she is indeed a third-level sergeant. This is indeed a rank symbol of the community army. However, the destruction of the country had already occurred. Yu Lian glanced at the solemn Miss Sergeant again, especially at the handsome and heroic face, and vaguely guessed the current situation. What is this? 2 weeks. Fire. Lieutenant Monsun shouted. More than a dozen kinetic energy rifles flickered with electromagnetic halos, accompanied by a dull sound, instantly shooting hundreds of steel nail bullets into the smoke and dust. Immediately, accompanied by mournful and ferocious ghost cries and wolf howls, as well as the flying limbs and broken arms resembling insects and beasts, the denser smell and blood condensed into a nauseating mist, spreading over in a more insane manner. Obviously, the barrage of kinetic energy rifles does not make them retreat. What the hell is this? A black man with the rank of sergeant gritted his teeth and cursed. A slightly burlier sergeant beside him gritted his teeth and continued shooting with a rifle in one hand, while the other hand was already clasped to the power axe at his waist. He is the strongest and tallest person in the entire team, without wearing an external skeleton, but he is noticeably taller than the worn sergeant and the annoying lieutenant. However, even the giant man who could visually strangle a bear with his wrist showed obvious nervousness. If it were truly a wild beast nurtured by nature, it would be impossible to bravely charge through gunfire and bullets. This kind of cognition beyond common sense represents the unknown, and naturally can also bring panic. Ahem. Roar. The alien monster, which looked very much like a large hyena, but had insect-like claws protruding from its 2 ribs, pounced out of the smoke and showed a fierce and threatening aura. At first glance, there were hundreds of them, but I don't know how many were still under the cover of smoke and dust. Among those large hyenas, there is also a large armored cobra that stands upright and instantly exceeds 2 meters, waving its claws like a praying mantis. It's really terrifying. It looks like a predator with no emotions, and there are so many groups that they don't seem like carnivores. The thick shell around me that can carry bullets forward hard doesn't even know what it evolved for. Everyone is very scared and is gritting their teeth to persevere. But Yu Lian only felt humiliated, so humiliated that he almost shed tears uncontrollably. Help me up. Bring me my atomic light spear, wind-blowing explosive gun, and dawn-breaking sword. Anyway, I am still the master who fought against the ether dragon for 300 rounds. Even if it's your queen, I've beaten her more than once. But now they are being ridden by a group of the lowest level jumping insects and venomous snakes. What kind of a deal is this? End of this chapter. Chapter 2, Are You Riding Your Face? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2, Are You Riding Your Face? Although that's the case, Yu Lian didn't have the atomic light spear he snatched from a certain star knight in the Empire, nor did he have the wind blaster spear samples he stole from the Alliance's future star laboratory, nor did he have the psychic sword he obtained from the Enlightener ruins that could cut open the scales of the star dragon and the armor of the Titan. He is now only a semi-disabled person who is completely immobile, with only a suspected future celebrity sergeant and a group of unreliable police officers, commonly known as police miscellaneous fish or miscellaneous workers. They are indeed not very reliable. A group of living people lined up in a line, standing in place with rifles popping and popping. There were no scattered lines, no cross firepower, and no progressive firepower positions full of layers. They accidentally thought they were laying out battle lines there. Really, how unbelievable is a group of old men treating themselves like warships. Yu Lian also knows that they really can't be blamed for this. The entire galaxy has received gifts from its predecessors too early, and various technology trees are a bit crooked. Not to mention the community Earthlings who are unbearable to fairer, even the two dominant empires and alliances that have now divided the galaxy, their infantry tactics are still of this virtue. However, a team of more than 10 people, without supporting heavy firepower, no means of transportation, and even external power skeletons, commonly known as mechas, only have 4 sets. One of which is still worn by oneself and should have been broken. That's really unbearable. If it were an empire, even the guards of the inland lords would not have committed such foolishness. The Ferrari of the Blue Star community has indeed been passed down. Yu Lian made a comparison between the two memories and it was refreshing. Fortunately, although our team is not very reliable, the enemy on the opposite side is not a vast sea of brave claw worms and Leviathan-class beasts that can withstand warships, but rather the most ordinary jumping insects and venomous snakes. In the era of Yu Lian, they were just cannon fodder and support in the swarm of insects. It was not enough to carry out terrorist attacks behind enemy lines, and occasionally they could serve as emergency rations. However, if they were to go to the front battlefield, they would go to deliver vegetables to the regular army equipped to teeth. The security personnel do not have much tactical literacy, but after all, they are holding electromagnetic rifles that can spit out thousands of bullets per minute, still forming a dense barrage. Although those monsters that resemble insects and beasts have evolved shells capable of carrying bullets, as long as they are living beings, there is ultimately a limit. In Yu Lian's field of vision, there are actually not a single one who truly rushed into front of everyone, and each one is injured. Baka! Lieutenant and Anti-Monsun shouted. Bean! The bulliest man in the entire team immediately let out a roar that a normal person would not be able to roar. He took a brisk step out of the team and lifted the power axe from his waist. His powered axe is also more than a circle larger than that of a normal soldier, and when he unfolds the axe blade, it is clear that it is a wheel. However, this sergeant's hand is also lightly weighted, and when he dances, it really moves like thunder, showing his dominance. The first jumping bug that broke through the fire net was hit on the head by the big axe, and it was instantly shattered into pieces. That's not all, the corpse of the jumping bug flew back like a hit large baseball and hit a prickly snake. The latter had already unfolded its shell and was preparing to fly, but was hit back into the barrage and turned into a sieve on the spot. For the sake of community. Mr. Lieutenant, who was also a strong man, shouted and jumped behind the sergeant. He leaned back against the other person, holding a chain-saw sword that made a piercing, buzzing sound, in both hands. With a flick of his hand, he sliced the other jumping bug in half. His timing for lifting the sword was too clever, as if the jumping bug was right on the edge of the sword. It is evident that he is a skilled swordsman. The one used should be Imperial Stormtrooper fighting swordsmanship. Type 1-inch, also known as Beast Type, which is specifically used to deal with large beasts in swordsmanship. Although developers are the spiritual aristocrats of the Empire, they are still a common skill that can be learned as long as they serve in the Imperial Army. Currently, they have spread throughout the galaxy. What a pair of sturdy heroes. A person with innate divine power and exceptional swordsmanship, even in the era of cold weapons, could have made a name for themselves in history or even opened a mansion and built a tooth with this strength. He felt that he had to do something and moved his body again. This time, the piercing pain came from the lower body. However, fortunately, the upper body has regained consciousness. Yu Lian's upper body was only covered in a field suit, while his lower body was still wrapped in a power skeleton, or in other words, only the lower half of the power skeleton remained. Weapons, don't you have any weapons? Yu Lian fumbled twice and actually touched the handle of the rifle on the side of the power stretcher. He checked a bit and found that the magazine was full, and there was still more than half of the battery, which was enough. Okay, we have weapons now. But now there's another technical issue. He can't even lift his body up, he doesn't even have a shooting range. Who should he hit? Yu Lian tried to move his lower body again, not only motionless, but also painful enough to make himself sweat profusely. The armor of steel alloy can provide 3 times its own strength, allowing it to run at a sprint speed of 100 meters for half an hour. It can hold 2,000 bullets, 10 grenades, and a power axe or chainsaw sword that a normal person cannot wield. However, it has now become a shackle that restricts his basic movements. A poor and weak body. Besides, where exactly did I get hurt? Yu Lian couldn't help but mutter softly. Your waist has been severely injured, replied Sergeant Sharika beside him. This beautiful girl, who is suspected to be a future celebrity, answered while shooting with full concentration. Unlike others who lean their firepower, this girl has been firing triple shots all the time, accurately hitting the jumping insects that burst out of the barrage with each shot, always able to completely kill them, perfectly supporting the 2 fierce teammates in hand-to-hand combat. Now, there is at least 80% chance that Yu Lian is certain, and the other party should be that person. Sorry. Even though you fought hard to pull Xiao Qiao out of the insect's mouth and suffered such a serious injury, he still couldn't be rescued. This time, the other woman in the team, who had an average appearance, figure, and temperament, was speaking. Her military uniform has a red snake staff emblem, representing her identity as a military doctor. However, does a female military doctor actually not have a medical special power skeleton? Do the security forces not understand how to cherish technical talents? Yu Lian thought so, but the young military doctor had already picked up such a thick needle and without saying a word, pierced her waist. At the moment of piercing, it was very painful, but then there was a chill, and the pain was slightly imperceptible. It seemed that my physical strength had also recovered a lot. At least, Yu Lian was really able to barely hold up half of his body, and his vision was also broader. Lieutenant, you still need to rest now. Don't worry, we can definitely fight back. The military doctor was startled by Yu Lian's movements and quickly stepped forward to dissuade him, but the latter loudly said, Ina, shoot the snake. Yaina Zarika, a staff sergeant of the new Human Defense Guard of the Blue Star community, was startled and thought to herself, you've only been in office for less than 3 days. When have we become so familiar? But when it came to the mouth, it became. What is a prickly snake? Miss Sargent, of course, is unaware of the military scientific name that was only recognized by various countries in the galaxy a few years later. That's the group of large cobras. When they unfold their shells, they just want to spurt and shoot at the chest cavity under their shells. When prickly snakes spray their spines, it is their strongest moment. In the future, those species of venomous snakes that have evolved to the pinnacle can spray flying spikes from their chest shells up to thousands of meters in the air, and can still penetrate 2 centimeters of alloy armor. But similarly, this is also their weakest moment. The moment the carapace opens, it also means that the central nervous system and muscles in the chest cavity are completely unprotected. Of course, capturing a momentary shooting opportunity in the smoky battlefield is a great test of a soldier's shooting skills. This is not a future where every mobile infantry is equipped with individual targeting radar. You know, even space warships now have a bunch of hand-cranked anti-aircraft guns. Pop pop pop. Pop pop pop. Pop 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 pop. Sergeant Ina Sirica began shooting, still the classic 3-shot shooting style. She also did not disappoint Yu Lian and perfectly displayed the archery of a suspected future celebrity. Every triple shot, there must be a prickly snake flipping over the flesh and blood fragments behind its shell, howling and rolling to death. So, for a whole minute, not a single one completed the piercing and spitting. However, perhaps due to the loss of Ina's precise shooting, more jumping insects did indeed emerge from the barrage. One of them even surpassed the sharp blades of the swordsman lieutenant and the fierce male sergeant, and rushed towards a soldier. This private is completely dumbfounded. Wearing ordinary field uniforms and a bulletproof vest, it is impossible to block the opponent's sharp mouthparts and blades, as they are about to be killed with a single blow. Yu Lian raised his gun and fired. He was very fortunate that his current body was very weak and suspected of being disabled, but he also had a certain shooting instinct. Coupled with his meticulously honed shooting experience in memory, he was able to accurately deliver bullets into the jumping bug's bloody mouth and then explode its dog head. However, when he had to join the battle as a disabled person, it only meant that they were really being ridden. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. The more classical the method, the more timeless it becomes. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. The more classical the method, the more timeless it becomes. Yu Lian moved his gun and ignored the almost paralyzed private. He then grabbed the trigger and fired a shot, allowing the bullet to pass through the crowd and through two savages dancing in their bloody mouths. With a snap, it pierced through the chest of a venomous snake. You actually have this ability. Ina glanced at Yu Lian in surprise for the first time. So, what exactly is the image of the owner of my body? Yu Lian is full of curiosity about his current self. You should know that the so-called quasi-captain of the community actually refers to reserve officers, in other words, high-achieving students from senior military academies who have not yet graduated. They are truly the proud sons of heaven who can overlook the mixed fish of the security forces from the cloud. In the military, they are known as the elite bureaucratic group, and when they rise up, they are like riding a rail elevator. If you can't become a general before retirement, then you're really doing poorly. By comparison, the other two officers in the team, the swordsman lieutenant and the lieutenant who always wants to throw themselves away, should be the so-called ordinary group or non-professional group. You can tell from their age that one is at least in their early 40s and the other should also be in their 30s, which is a typical realistic career template that burns high after retiring with the benefits of a school official. Speaking of which, Lieutenant Monsun is chopping insects. Where is the lieutenant who is also equipped with a power skeleton? Yu Lian quickly saw each other in the crowd. He is not only not at the forefront, but also a bit behind, standing in a place where he can escape at any time. Lieutenant! What are you doing? You have a power skeleton, don't be afraid of wild beasts. If you don't go up, you can't let unarmed people go up, can you? Yu Lian's gaze paused on the power hammer on the opponent's pendant for a moment, making sure that it was absolutely intact. With a hammer, he could definitely shake out the overnight flight of jumping insects and venomous snakes. The fact is indeed so. At first glance, these insects are the beginner versions that have not evolved, and even with brute force, they will not be opponents of human mobile infantry wearing powered bones. Even if everyone is using an antique with a lot of flaws like the AS-40, as long as they have this thing, the mobile infantry is like a small humanoid tank. Not to mention the jumping bug, even the massive claw bug can have the power to fight in one battle. The second lieutenant's face immediately turned red and he loudly argued, "Shut up. Brigadier, you're still a student. What do you understand? I'm cowardly, no. I need to be in the command seat." He blushed and his forehead was bulging with veins, probably trying to say difficult words like, "How can an officer be called a coward?" or "I must ensure smooth command." However, he heard Lieutenant Monsun, who was chopping insects, loudly say, "Lieutenant Don Russo. I want you to be in position." The second lieutenant shrunk his head, let out a low "oh," gritted his teeth, and finally lifted the power hammer, walking towards the front line with an attitude like walking to the execution ground. He sighed and looked as if he was about to be chopped to death in the next second. Giving his dynamic skeleton to anyone present would be more constructive. Yu Lian thought. Of course, we must also understand Lieutenant Russo, after all, even if he is wearing a power skeleton, there are still dangers. For example, the AS-40 power skeleton does not come with a helmet, or because its matching helmet does not have a fire control system, camera, and air conditioning, wearing it is very uncomfortable and affects vision. Normal people do not want to wear it, and they often do not wear it when on missions. They would rather wear a bulletproof helmet shamelessly. But you can't expect insects to be so particular about not chopping your head, can you? However, to be fair, although this second lieutenant is a coward who always wants to leave the seriously injured Yu company behind, his combat ability is still good. After all, he is a non-professional group. Can he still rely on his education without relying on his hard work? A power hammer can be considered quite methodical in hitting the east and west. With the accurate output of Yu Lian and Ina, 2 special shooters, the 3 anti-monster MTs in front are also very awesome. The other soy sauce people are at least serious soldiers who did not do the stupid thing of pulling the leg when angry people complained. The insect corpses in the opposite side soon pushed them. The strange odor between insect body fluids and animal plasma has become even more pungent. Actually, it can fertilize the field and is a very good agricultural organic fertilizer, as long as you can tolerate this odor. Yu Lian thought. There are at least 200 to 300 insects in this wave, but it is not a problem to eliminate them. So even he became a little more relaxed. Yes, what is needed is elimination, not repulsion. However, soon, Yu Lian seemed to vaguely hear a whistle passing through the hot and dry air, and it quickly faded away. Then, all the creatures that later became known as alien insects, like controlled dolls, stopped walking and turned their heads one after another, receding like a tide. Just as they were surging like a tide just now. Order and prohibit, neat and uniform, without any hesitation or panic. Everyone was stunned, unaware that something had happened, and no one felt the fleeting subtle fluctuations just now. Except for Ina raising her eyebrows slightly and scanning around with suspicion. Yu Lian cursed inwardly, pushed his body hard, and finally made himself sit higher again, gripping the rifle tightly with one hand. Ha! Lieutenant Monsun took a deep breath and put down his chainsaw sword before feeling the soreness in his arm. Even wearing exoskeleton, the cost of this battle just now was quite high. He looked at the sergeant beside him who was about the same height as himself, even without armor. He held a specially designed power axe wheel that was as big as a wheel for a few minutes, but still his face was not red and he couldn't help but feel that these bears were really born animals. Lieutenant Monsun took out a small aluminum teapot from his bone pendant bag, took a sip, and handed it to the sergeant next to him. Lieutenant Russo, who could see clearly from behind, immediately blushed. However, before the sergeant, who had shown a simple and sincere smile, took the wine jug over, he heard Yu Lian give up and say, "Everyone, scatter." No one paid attention to him. Everyone was very confused, even Ina, who had just cooperated well with Yu Lian, showed a puzzled expression. "Lieutenant, pay attention to your identity." Lieutenant Russo roared back in a louder voice. He finally found a way to fight back. This poor and weak body is really just a student. Yu Lian let out a deep sigh in his heart, then lifted his rifle and aimed it at Lieutenant Russo. "Hello. Even if you become angry and embarrassed, you wouldn't shoot Shangwan on the spot, would you? I know you lunar people are all arrogant, but I have never heard of such an unsound mind." Lieutenant Russo was shocked and his first reaction was not to raise his gun, but to raise his hands. The person who reacted the fastest was Ina, who raised her gun and aimed it at the back of Yu Lian's head. Just as she was about to give a scold, the latter had already pulled the trigger. Should I shoot or not? Miss Sargent was momentarily confused. However, several bullets had already slipped out of the barrel, failing to hit Russo, but instead grazed his waist and crashed diagonally into the sand on the ground. Then, the sand stirred up a ripple as if it had been disrupted by the calm lake surface. Between the brown-yellow rocks and the red sand and mud, a deep howl could be heard. There are enemies in the soil. The lieutenant finally reacted, but why didn't the sensors respond? Because a spider worm as big as a crocodile crawls in the ground with less movement than a mole rat, the outdated tactical sensors that have not been upgraded now really treat the other person as a mole rat. Yu Lian really wants to answer that way. Spread it all out. Ina shouted loudly. Miss Sargent's prestige was much higher than that of Company U, and the soldiers reflexively followed suit. Lieutenant Russo continued to be confused, and he was still unsure if Yu Lian was going to shoot him earlier but missed. Ordinary people couldn't react at this moment and instinctively blocked the roaring sound within reach. Until the huge insect blade poked out from the cracks in the soil and cut his neck from behind, the second lieutenant's tendon still did not twist. His head fell to the ground, and the expression frozen on his face remained bewildered and puzzled. Broken gun. Can a gun that cannot kill spiderworms inside through thick rocks and sand be called a gun? If it weren't for having nothing left in his hand except for this C10, Yu Lian would really want to get used to it on the ground. Everyone frantically poured firepower towards the place where the insect blade rose, but there was nothing left except for the churning rocks. Angry Lieutenant Monsun did not stop them, but instead used his comrade's power hammer and swung it to the ground. In fact, he didn't know what command to give everyone, so he could only use brute force recklessly. Upon seeing this, Sergeant Juan also raised his battle axe and followed the ground hammer. This is just venting. Yu Lian sighed, shook off his mecha gloves, and slowly pressed them onto the ground. Brigadier Captain. The young military doctor, who had an average appearance, a plain figure, and an unknown name, looked worried. She is very worried that Yu Lian, who is seriously injured, will come into unprotected contact with the ground in the alien wilderness, which will increase her workload due to the infection of some parasites. Yes, this broken planet looks particularly capable of producing parasites. Isn't this clear at a glance? Cease fire, Yu Lian shouted to everyone. No one paid attention to him. Cease fire. Ina, who had been standing beside her, repeated it at a volume more than 9 times higher than Yu Lian's. Everyone has ceased fire, including Lieutenant Monsun and Sergeant Bin, who are in a frenzy. Yu Lian closed his eyes and silently felt the subtle vibration rhythm of the ground. In the past, of course, I didn't have to be so troublesome. The 7-ring saint's superb perception could capture the movements of every insect deep in the ground from a few hundred kilometers away. However, now that I have become so weak, I have to resort to mortal means. However, although it is a mortal means, it is a necessary skill for a qualified pioneer and ranger. Land has its own rhythm, and the crawling of insects will break this rhythm. This is the truth that Yu Lian's most respected mentor told him. It sounds mystical, but to put it simply, it's the same as the ancient scouts lying on the ground listening. However, Yu Lian's accumulated experience is rich enough to be done with his hands. The more classical the approach, the less outdated it is actually. That's it. As mentioned earlier, spider worms, among these strange insects, have a sneaky movement that is even smaller than that of groundhogs, let alone the sound of human footsteps or even horse hooves. However, even so, there is still movement. 17, 21. 25, 30. Yu Lian murmured a command that nobody understood, pausing a few times before suddenly shouting, Ina. 2 meters in the 3 o'clock direction. The sergeant, who had already wielded the chainsaw sword at some point, turned around and danced her sword without hesitation. The roar of the chainsaw was instantly covered by the sound of torn bones and the friction of gold and iron. The massive creature, resembling a crustacean spider, silently raised its half-body, but its massive bone tongs failed to hit the target this time and were instead cut open by the chainsaw sword on the spot. It didn't make any painful howls, it just wanted to burrow into the ground again, but Ina pressed down the rifle with her back hand, and against its shell was a barrage of bullets. The big spider was knocked back and flew out a few steps, and by this time, Sergeant Bear and Sergeant Black had already pounced. The former is born with divine power, so naturally he still carries his large powered axe, and the black sergeant, as the second strongest man in the team, although without a power skeleton, still wielded a high-carbon crystal war hammer. The two of them were pounding around the giant insect, and at first glance, they thought they were making rice cakes. The big spider was flying with blood and flesh, convulsing a few times before becoming inactive. At this point, the military doctor lady who had opened her mouth wide all the way made a sound and then let out a deep breath. She looked at Yu Lian in front of her, and for some reason, her face turned red. Just as she was about to say something, the latter grabbed her hand and it was the area. The young military doctor was pulled straight to the sand, but she happened to let go of the insect limbs protruding from behind her. The other spider beetle showed a small half of its body on the ground at some point, but when it missed a single hit, it was ready to shrink. But before that, Yu Lian had already opened fire. He emptied half of the magazine, broke its mouthparts, pierced through its head shell, and finally shattered its internal central tissue. He was fortunate that these two spider worms were juveniles that had not evolved. If it were the kind of future adult divers who could extend insect stingers hundreds of meters away and pierce the tank chassis in one go, everyone would be doomed this time. Yes, just like the regular army of the community using antiques, the insect swarm natural disaster that will cast a terrifying shadow over the entire civilized society of the galaxy in the future is also in the process of obscene development. Yu Lian propped up half of his body and looked seriously at the lieutenant who had finally regained his senses. He said in a deep voice, "Sir, this place is too spacious and must be moved immediately." The strong wind in the desert blew by, and Lieutenant Russo's head rolled away several meters, making his facial features bloody and indistinct. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. I am Yu Lian. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. I am Yu Lian. Since it is not suitable to stay for a long time, it must be withdrawn, but before that, there are still some things that need to be dealt with first and last. Lieutenant Monsun confirmed the condition of everyone, except for one who was still lying down. Everything was fine. He and a group of soldiers observed a few seconds of silence in front of Lieutenant Russo's body before removing the plaque and allowing it to be exposed in the wilderness. During the extraordinary period, it is believed that the living spirit of Lieutenant Russo, who has already merged with the spirit of the universe, can also be understood. Then, the lieutenant retrieved the exoskeleton and handed it over to the black sergeant. Exoskeleton is now a hard currency. Even a person with no nerves can see that facing those non-insect and non-beast monsters just now, some are like knives and plates, while others are like fish and meat. Besides, this thing was originally an important property of the military and could not be left for burial. That black sergeant with a thick neck and a big head, who seemed to be called Yu or something, felt carefree and happy when he got the new equipment. He probably thought he was very handsome wearing a steel armor that walked with wind before. If he hadn't just died, he might have danced to celebrate. Even so, no one expressed dissatisfaction. This indicates that Lieutenant Russo's popularity is indeed not very good. I hope he can really close his eyes. The reason why the power skeleton was not handed over to the clearly strongest combat force in the team, Sergeant Baka of the Bears, was because the AS-40 power armor had significant flaws in its design. The suitable height for its wearer is between 1.6 to 1.95 meters, and the weight should be below 100 kilograms. It appears to be specifically designed for use by standard humans on Earth. Where is Sergeant Kashyong? Look at that guy who can become an unsolvable monster in basketball. His body is one circle larger than his power skeleton. If he could fit it in, wouldn't it be the legendary space folding technique? I heard that the Empire and Alliance have also prepared specialized power armor for their beast stormtroopers. The nurse, who had an average appearance, physique, and temperament, had a hint of sadness in her voice. She probably felt quite unhappy that she didn't have a set of exclusive medical armor, or simply didn't like that big black guy. Of course, Yu Lian now knows that this corporal named Belinda Leonard is a nurse rather than a specialized military doctor. The true exclusive doctor of the team is Sergeant Banks, who is still at the base. Now, everyone is ready to consider returning to the base. After all, they inexplicably fought 2 encounters with beasts, with 4 people killed, including an officer. Nearly half of their ammunition and energy were consumed, and everyone was exhausted and mentally tense, carrying an immobile seriously injured soldier. Normal armies are unable to continue their missions. However, as the only technician present, Belinda expressed her opposition seriously. Captain Yu's injury cannot be delayed. I must find a relatively safe and clean place for emergency treatment. Everyone fell silent for a moment, then nodded silently again. Yu Lian is everyone's comrade in arms. If a few days ago, due to unfamiliarity, this talented intern officer who suddenly parachuted in gave everyone a sense of distance, but the battle just now was enough to make the simple soldiers treat him as their own. So, this poor and weak body is also called Yu Lian. Yu Lian thought. So, how did I actually become a drag? Yu Lian thought again. Go there and find a cave. Yu Lian pointed to the nearby mountains. Look at the typical karst topography of the mountains, which is also a common terrain on this planet. It's not difficult to find a cave to hide in. Let's go. Lieutenant Monsun said to everyone in a calm tone. The excellent sergeant with power armor and the Sergeant Baka without power armor pulled up Yu Lian's power stretcher and set off first. The power stretcher can actually move on its own, but there seems to be a problem with the one Yu Lian is lying on. The battery flickers faintly due to insufficient power. Just like this entire infantry team, it is full of absurd discord because there are too many flaws to know where to start. Dude, it's the era of the universe. Mobile infantry is not equipped with sufficient firepower and lacks a power skeleton for each person. They even have to walk on 2 legs in the perilous alien wilderness. Isn't it possible to have some personnel transport vehicles, not to mention airships and the like? 5 minutes later, everyone did find a relatively spacious natural cave to temporarily settle down. Aina, holding a gun and carrying 2 sentries, was guarding the entrance of the cave. Bear Man Baka and Black Big Yu are careful to explore the depths of the cave. The lieutenant began to take out his communicator and communicate with his superiors, but judging from his anxious appearance, he probably couldn't get in touch. The others took turns resting. The nurse called for the help of 2 soldiers and carefully pulled out Yu Lian's body from the only remaining half of the exoskeleton. It can only be described as pulling, because this half of the outer armor has clearly been subjected to severe impact, has deformed and scrapped, and cannot be opened using normal methods. At this moment, the painkillers on Yu Lian's body had also passed, and he was almost suffocated by the pain. Of course, as an extraordinary spiritual saint who has opened the 7th star ring, he cannot show timidity, embarrass himself, or be indecent. He gritted his teeth tightly and remained silent until his face turned pale and he sweated profusely. His veins suddenly twitched at the corners of his mouth, making the soldiers around him revere him. The nurse's eyes were full of brilliance. Then, the indescribable and unclear gaze quickly turned into regret. Don't be afraid of what I want to say, Belinda said carefully. I'm a soldier, I won't be afraid. Your spine has been broken. Who is the spine? Well, it's much more serious than I imagined. Yu Lian's mood suddenly became heavy, but he still comforted, but it's not a big deal. Throwing it into a culture dish can still cure it. That's gene therapy. However, this kind of device is only available in Toulon. You can get a shot of nanomachine in the medical room of the military station, but I can only temporarily help you fix the bone. Medical nanomechanical drilling into the gaps of blood vessels and bones can temporarily replace nerves and fix the spine, allowing Yu Lian to walk like a normal person. Let's fix it first, Yu Lian forced a smile. Then it's time to inject nanomachines into the soldier station, and then go to the capital of New Human Star, Toulon, for further treatment. Of course, Yu Lian has a way to instantly revive himself with full health, blue, and full state, but this method is really not suitable for normal people. I don't even know if it's feasible. After all, my current body looks very weak at first glance. There is no trace of being a proud son of heaven. The nurse started to act and magically pulled out a bunch of electric drills, hammers, and steel bars. Perhaps she felt that this treatment would put a lot of pressure on Yu Lian, so she began to chat awkwardly. Also, do you remember what happened before the coma? Why do you ask that? No, I just feel confused in your eyes. When I was injured before and hit my head, I always worried that your brain might have been hit by some impact or something. Confused a ghost. Are you the protagonist of any book? Is there always a divine skill to see the fleeting emotional fluctuations and facial expressions of Lao Shitzi in the eyes of others? Yu Lian's pressure was a bit high, so he decided to shift the topic and casually said, speaking of which, everyone is really very energetic this time. You don't make airships or cars, are you here for hiking training? The nurse hesitated for a moment and then said with a puzzled expression, well. Lieutenant Russo has already died. I know he made many mistakes, but after all, people have already died. So what did I do? What is the tone of blaming me for dragging someone out and whipping the corpse? I know Lieutenant Cruz drove the airship away to the Governor General's office, and you are very dissatisfied. Out of 5 armored personnel carriers, 4 of them had their energy packs sold by Lieutenant Russo to a Minlan merchant, which made you even more angry. You even said you wanted to report something to the Toulon command. No wonder Lieutenant Russo wants to leave me so badly. But this child named Yu Lian, you are also very stubborn. I don't know if this is a normal operation of the community army. Not to mention the security forces, even the Marine Corps and Space Fleet are difficult to avoid. Just poke it out like this, not afraid of being shot black. What, you said the last one? This, that. You said you didn't trust Lieutenant Russo and came to drive it yourself. Later, didn't you just fall into a trap? Oh, the result is my pot. Well, neither Lieutenant Cruz nor Lieutenant Russo is a good person, pretending to be bossy and bullying us little soldiers. However, the small treasury they brought us will still be divided among us. So, sir, could you please don't? What are these special values? My soldiers must have killed you. Yu Lian thought. Do you think it's really unreal? A lunar man. At some point, Lieutenant Monsun also came to the side and sat down with a familiar expression, squeezing out a stiff smile. I know this, but not only did I not stop it, but I also took the largest portion. No, on the contrary, this is just too real. Also, why do you call me a lunar man? We are different from you. You are a lunar man, the proud son of heaven. For at most 5 or 6 years, I have to call you, sir, instead. You have a great future, but who among us security officers who work in the colony, didn't run to this remote and impoverished area to gnaw on sand with the sand pirates for money? So, is the lunar man you're talking about the same person? Sigh, I'm so stupid, really. I just thought that Cruz would be back in a few days at most. We've already reported the energy pack of the armored vehicle as training wear and tear, and there will be new ones delivered next month. But I didn't know that the Sand people would gather to rebel at this time. They started to besiege Toulon. I didn't know that the headquarters would let us go back to support at this time. Sigh, it's all my fault. The lieutenant's words were full of information, and he didn't know if they had a stimulating effect on Yu Lian's chaotic memory. He suddenly felt a headache and couldn't help but furrow his brow, touching the back of his head. It was indeed the boss's bag. Well. Lieutenant, you should be very familiar with Captain Bonaparte, right? You are all lunar beings, so it must be like this. Last time I was in Toulon, I saw you eating with Captain. Well, if possible. Yu Lian covered his increasingly painful head and opened his mouth to take a breath of cold air. Captain. The little nurse's face turned white with fear, and Lieutenant Monsun felt like his own pot, and his mouth twitched uncontrollably. All the soldiers resting in the cave were startled, and Sergeant Ina, who was guarding the cave entrance, quickly walked over upon seeing this. "Hello. Hello, can you hear me? Look into my eyes, Lieutenant, look into my eyes. Our moon man, look into my eyes. Who am I, do you remember?" The lieutenant shouted. You are Lieutenant Bill Monson, commander of the 12th Army Station under the new human garrison command. Who are you? What is your name, how old are you this year? Why are you here? My name is Yu Lian, a brigadier general of the Blue Star Community Defense Force. I am 21 years old and a fourth-year student in the Strategic Research Department of the 830th class at the Central Defense University. I came here for a short term 3-month military service to prepare for my graduation internship. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Me, Yu Lian, Moon Man. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 5. Me, Yu Lian, Moon Man. Yes, the memories belonging to this body are fully revived. In an instant, too many memories belonging to another person flood in. Even with Yu Lian's mental state, there will be a brief loss of consciousness. However, this is like a stress response to brain trauma, and it's not surprising that everyone is so nervous. Do you remember how you got injured? What happened before? Ina also asked urgently. I went to save a soldier who was bitten halfway by a sinkhole, but was ambushed, Yu Lian said slowly. Ina finally breathed a sigh of relief, but then said with lingering fear, that thing is so scary. It tore open the back of your power armor all at once. If it weren't for the lieutenant dropping a vibration grenade, you would have. It's really thrilling. Yeah. Can it not be thrilling? The one who bit on that unlucky guy's lower body was clearly a tank bug hiding only in the sand pit. As for the sneak attack on me personally, it must be a thorn snake king. The armor of AS-40 is cut to the bone, and ordinary snakes and jumping insects really don't have the killing power to break through defense. So, just now I was in pain all over and felt like my spine was broken. I'm afraid it wasn't just being attacked by insects, but also the blow from your grenade, right? Thinking of this, Yu Lian couldn't help but look at Lieutenant Monson with a rather unfriendly gaze. The latter quickly accompanied an unnatural smile. Your image as a pure man swordsman collapsed a few minutes ago. Also, although I knew early on that my name was Zhuan Wei, and he must be a top student in an elite bureaucratic military academy, I didn't expect him to be so high. Isn't the so-called Central Defense University the leader of the National Military Academy community? In a sense, it's more difficult than in my previous life to take the entrance exam to Tsinghua University, Peking University, and Harvard University. Those who were recruited were all elite academic elites with both civil and military skills. Because the headquarters of the military academy is located in the lunar city of Guanghan, its graduates are also jokingly referred to as lunar humans in the military, making them elite talents that any organization in the military is eager for. And isn't the so-called Strategic Research Department the most elite and difficult subject to enter in this top university, and its graduates are naturally the elites among the elites, known as the cradle of supervisors. Yes, although they are all so-called elite bureaucratic groups, there is still a chain of disdain within this class. Graduates from other military academies or departments take the rail elevator when promoted, while those from the Strategic Research Department directly cross the Star Gate. And, 830 boundaries. Isn't it the 830 from later generations? Also, is the Sand Army besieging the city of Toulon Port? Officer Bonaparte. Yes, it should be the Port Toulon incident that appeared in later history textbooks, which occurred in November 829 of the galactic calendar. It triggered a series of events as a trigger, ultimately causing the Blue Star community to completely lose control of the Stargate and Fairy Galaxy colonies. As for Officer Bonaparte, a tall, and handsome figure quickly appeared in Yu Lian's memory. Lieutenant Colonel Eleanor Bonaparte, born into a renowned military family, has produced 6 generals and 1 marshal for 3 generations. Like herself, she is a graduate of the Strategic Research Department. However, when Yu Lian first enrolled, Eleanor was already a fresh graduate in her last year, and later graduated with the highest overall score. Whether it's education, ability, or background, they are impeccable, and the future is naturally predictable. It has been over 3 years since graduation, and she now holds the rank of lieutenant colonel. No one doubts that she will become a general before the age of 30. This situation is not uncommon in history, but it did only occur during wartime. Now, Eleanor is serving as the chief of staff of the new human guard in the city of Toulon, which means she is also surrounded by the army of the Sand people in the city. Well, it seems that our relationship is quite good. When she first arrived, she even invited me to eat charcoal roasted groundhog. Yu Lian suddenly recalled too much and his head hurt even more. He had the intention to sort out some more information from so many mixed memories, but now he really didn't have enough time to do that. It's not suitable to stay here for a long time, Yu Lian said in a deep voice. You have already mentioned this once before. Lieutenant Monsun really wants to say that. What I mean is, Lieutenant, look down the mountain. Soldier A, who was watching at the door, shouted loudly. Silence. Yu Lian whispered. Soldier A trembled for a moment and didn't speak again. Everyone present couldn't help but look at Lieutenant Monsun, but the latter just calmly spread out his hand, with a helpless and conscious expression of, see, let's start, this is the normal operation of the lunar man. However, Yu Lian had no intention but paid attention to everyone's attitude. He dragged his newly nailed lower body and climbed to the cave entrance, only to see dozens of insects gathering in the wilderness below the mountain. The insect claws were rubbing and crawling on the ground, obviously trying to find something, and then gradually moving towards this direction. Although there are only a few dozen, their aura is much more domineering than those hyenas-like jumping insects. Sure enough. Yu Lian pursed his lips. That's the claw worm, also known as the warrior worm. It's a combat bug that can engage in combat with mobile infantry armed to the teeth. I mean well equipped and well-trained Imperial or Alliance Marine Corps soldiers, not Ferrari's unbearable community guard miscellaneous fish. As for the Thorn Snake King, it must be hidden among the warrior worms. It is a lord bug that has evolved a certain level of intelligence. Although it is only a single-minded intelligence, it can completely serve as the leader of the insect army squad. It's only a matter of time before they can find this place, just like their dog-like behavior of sticking their tentacles to the ground, groping and groping. In fact, these bugs have a stronger sense of smell and hearing than dogs by more than an order of magnitude. As for what? Such a big battle. To avenge the one shot just now. I haven't heard that your insect swarm still has any kind of friendship. Oh. Perhaps. Yu Lian looked at Ina, who was also full of solemnity, and immediately guessed something. For a swarm of insects, a person like Miss Sargent is like a shining moving gold nugget. So, are the insects actually coming towards Ina? Yu Lian looked at Miss Sargent and decided not to tell her for now. Talking about future affairs casually is likely to be mistaken for madness. I have already suffered similar losses in my previous life. The memories that belong to this body are still a bit chaotic, and the rest can only be postponed. We must first solve these hunters before proceeding. Have Sergeant Baka and Sergeant Yu returned yet? Yes, sir. The black sergeant, who was returning at an unknown time, ran over with a thud. How is the situation? There is indeed a small path that leads to the back of the mountain. Well, it's just not very easy to walk. It's barely passable, Sergeant Baka said in a muffled voice. Unlike his fierce form during battle, Sergeant Bear is a calm and reserved person. Great, since he can barely pass through, then everyone won't have any problems. Yu Lian thought for a moment and then said, Sir, how many concussion grenades do we still have? The called oscillating grenade, as the name suggests, is used for shaking. This is certainly not a serious weapon of destruction, but it is an excellent choice for dealing with the local indigenous people of Xinhuman, who are rebellious and unruly. However, can this thing be used to deal with the group of large insects below the mountain that look even more difficult to deal with? The lieutenant was very suspicious, but still looked at Ina. I still have 3, Lieutenant has 2, Lieutenant Russo's has not been used, and there are 5. Your words, said Miss Sargent. The size of the shockwave grenade is quite large, but it is carried by several armored units present. It would be inhumane to let unarmed soldiers carry such heavy items. That's enough. Yu Lian calculated for a moment, go and remove the stretcher and the batteries from my discarded armor. What are you doing? Are you making a grenade? Why don't you use a regular grenade? The Type 20 infantry grenade we are equipped with is designed to deter unarmed indigenous sand people, and its power is not satisfactory. Even this hole is unlikely to collapse, making it difficult to penetrate the shells of those big insects. How hard they are, have you seen them before? However, with a power bone battery and a certain amount of oscillating grenades, I can match an impact bomb. It should be able to directly cause internal damage to the tissues under their shells. The principle seems to be this principle. But, are you capable of it too? Moon Man, no, Lieutenant, aren't you from the Strategic Research Department? Well, sir, the so-called Strategic Research Department means learning a little bit about everything and not being proficient in anything. Only then can one become a leader. Yu Lianli answered naturally. Lieutenant Monsun, who was more than twice the age of Yu Lian, felt a bit heartbroken. He thought that once the other party graduated, at most 3 to 5 years later, he would have to call the other party, sir, so he didn't know whether he should be relieved or even more frustrated. I heard that Defense University only taught you elite bureaucrats how to use imperial crystal knives to cut Andean beef from the Alliance and dip it in starfish sauce, right? I haven't heard of anyone teaching you how to make bombs, Ina said coldly. Lieutenant Monsun's face turned pale with fear, and he quickly kept winking at Miss Sargent. However, the latter remained completely unaware and continued, Lieutenant, you should have learned this skill from somewhere else, right? It's not just you, but also from the large number of militia teaching videos you personally appeared on. Yu Lian muttered to himself. Fortunately, the other party only said this and was not prepared to break the sand pot and ask the whole story. Yu Lian skipped this part with a meaningless smirk. He opened all the safety devices for the vibrating thunder, tied them together, and then took the battery and started pounding it. His movements were so skillful, like a habitual criminal who often used various types of bombs to rob banks and spaceships. Everyone was a bit stunned for a moment, feeling that his artistic style was getting further and further away from their imagined emperor, the Moon Man. Even so, the explosion range is limited and can only be detonated when they enter the cave. Even if they cannot be killed by the explosion, collapsed caves can still bury them. Lieutenant Monsun felt that even if he still had to ask for help from the other party, it was still necessary to say something at this moment, otherwise as a commander, he would not be able to hold on to his position. He said, well, Brigadier General, although your skills have amazed me, would it be a bit too much? We are hiding in this hole, and those mutants are not likely to. He did not fall, but only heard a sharp cry from the insect swarm at the foot of the mountain in the distance. The terrifying giant insects with their teeth and claws turned around neatly and rushed towards him at a speed of over 50 kilometers per hour. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Me, Yu Lian, sensitive individuals. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Me, Yu Lian, sensitive individuals. The lieutenant was a bit awkward, but fortunately everyone didn't pay attention to him anymore. Perhaps because Yu Lian's previously steady and habitual movements reassured everyone, and the soldiers were also relatively calm. Many people have started inspecting weapons. Ina loaded her gun early and looked at Yu Lian, waiting for his command. Don't be too fond of fighting, Yu Lian said. Help me up, let's retreat into the cave. Sergeant Yu, come and lead the way. The black man who had just put on his power armor was carrying a gun, exuding the aura of going through fire and water with a sword in front of him. "I'll cut it off." Aina fiddled with the gun, her face serious. "No need. Then I'll." Sergeant Bear spoke with a solemn voice. "So it's not necessary to say anything, why are they all so tragic? Did I say someone needs to sacrifice?" Yu Lian was furious. Everyone stopped talking and hurried on. An hour ago, the lieutenant who was also a swordsman shook his head and carefully followed the crowd. This cave is indeed quite deep, and the deeper it goes, the harder it becomes to walk, and the more rugged and winding it becomes. However, for now, it can still be traversed. Just as everyone could finally see the bright light, the chirping of insects came from behind. To be honest, the biological structure of insect groups is indeed closer to that of insects, and these organisms do not make a sound when hunting. However, perhaps it was the wicked taste of the queen who had beaten her many times in her previous life. She felt that the roar of so many insects was very oppressive, so she gave this attribute to her insect descendants. Which is understandable. When you see zombies besieging the city, isn't it also the old, ah 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 roar? Are your vocal cords all rotten? Aina and Baka, who fell at the end of the team, held guns and axes, and looked again at Yu Lian being carried. "Speed up. I tell you, if you dare to act like heroes, I dare to dismantle this thing." Yu Lianyang raised the cluster shock bomb in his hand. The two of them had no choice but to follow up again. Although they felt that Junwei, a student, was a bit impulsive, they were actually a bit moved in their hearts. Everyone present should also have this attitude. The nurse, who had an average appearance, physique, and temperament, even took out a face towel to help Yu Lian wipe his sweat. "He is really starting to hurt again now. I used to feel that I couldn't feel my lower body and every bone in my body was hurting, but now I feel that an extra steel bar has been inserted into my waist, and it has just been pulled out of the stove." Everyone dragged him, who was already a useless person, and finally saw the cave entrance. At this moment, the roar of the terror claw beetle seemed to be ringing in everyone's ears, making their legs a bit soft. Well, roars are still useful, even in the space age. The more classical it is, the less outdated it will be. Aina is getting close and shooting. However, she did not lose her sanity, nor did she stop and shoot while walking. Strike between their jaws. That's the center of the head. Yu Lian reminded loudly. Aina didn't doubt he was there, and then she shot 2 triple shots in a row. She was indeed satisfied to see the 2 giant insects squeezed in front fall down, blocking everyone's way instead. Then, Sergeant Baka grabbed her and quickened her pace. Finally, I saw the exit, or rather, it was a slanted opening on the rock wall. "Is that what you're talking about?" Sergeant wanted to curse. It's not because everyone can't climb, but because some unlucky guy with a broken spine was dragged out diagonally, probably even his life had to be wasted. Yu Lian really felt like he was about to die. If he had just felt that his bones were broken all over his body earlier, it would probably be really broken now. Moreover, there was no place where his internal organs were no longer in turmoil, but he only felt that black, yellow, red, purple, and green were all rushing into his nose, almost spewing out in a flurry. Miss Belinda hurriedly wiped her tears. Although it was a natural physiological reaction, Yu Lian still felt embarrassed and left it at her grandmother's house. Fortunately, everyone crawled out of the hole. Aina at the back also revealed half of her body, and the bear man Baka at the end of the team was pushing him out. He is the only one in the entire team who can push out people wearing over 100 pounds of power armor. Aina took a brisk step out of the hole and reached out to reach for the bear's hand. Yu Lian picked up his cluster bomb and closely watched the movements of the two at the entrance of the cave. The claw worm is a serious type of charging soldier, appearing to be very large and difficult to pass through narrow caves, but they have activated their digging skills and can dig up the ground much faster than the groundhog. Yu Lian was well aware that the cave could not block them for long. Once they left the cave and reached the wilderness, his group of defeated soldiers would not be able to make it through 1 or 2 rounds. We must take advantage of them squeezing here and send them off in one wave. Fortunately, it is a biological weapon, and the leader of the team is also a low-energy intelligence with only one muscle, making it difficult to understand the concept of traps. In a few years, these guys won't be easy to deceive anymore. At least in my time, they were not easy to deceive. Yu Lian saw Aina pulling the bear man, who was over 2 meters tall, out of the cave. He had already climbed to the cave entrance, holding a pistol in one hand and a bomb in the other. In the cave at the entrance of the cave, several fearsome clawed beetles stretched out their 2 giant claws and 8 sharp claws and forcefully squeezed towards them. Behind them, more insects were still howling wildly, and there was a snake-shaped figure swimming through the gaps of the insects, moving swiftly and swiftly. Without hesitation, Yu Lian activated the bomb and threw it into the swarm of insects. The flickering light of the battery made the insect swarm stiffen for a moment. Yes, although they are living beings, they also need energy. Genes, more diverse genes are their evolutionary elements. More energy is their source of action. A different cry came from the insect swarm, seemingly condemning its own kind, but it was already too late. Yu Lian hit the manual trigger device of the cluster bomb with a single shot, and then rolled out with his head in his arms. This action is too agonizing for a semi-disabled person with a broken spine, and it feels like the burning red steel bar inside their waist has also been severed. A loud roar echoed through the entrance of the cave. The pressure cooker lid was flipped over 100 times, which is probably the current sound. Everyone feels like they are in the center of an earthquake. It's difficult to maintain balance, and the closest Yu Lian no longer has to struggle with his weak and disabled body, as the tumbling ground can move on its own. Just as those red, black, green, and purple things surged into his nose again and were about to burst out, just as he suspected he would definitely be shocked to death, a huge steel hand grabbed him and helped him up, leaning against his own body. That's Aina. The stabilizing device of the exoskeleton allowed Miss Sargent to balance her center of gravity in the first time, and her iron lumps now acted as a chair. You're too arrogant. Sir. There's nothing I can do, except for you. I really don't trust the shooting skills of the others. The difficulty of throwing the bomb into the insect swarm and then firing another shot can be imagined. There is certainly a reason why the mixed fish of the police force are at the bottom of the contempt chain. Then I can also. And then we went up to heaven together. Oh no, were we buried together? Aina gritted her teeth and remained silent, thinking that she must find a way to repay this life-saving kindness. However, Yu Lian felt a bit awkward. Although she was dressed in cold iron lumps, now she can be considered leaning on the human girl. Do you want to relax a little? Aina said. Miss, do you know how easily your words can make people think crooked? Yu Lian was stunned, but Miss Sargent had already opened the storage layer on the outer armor of the right thigh of the exoskeleton, revealing the hanging racks of the energy stick, cigarette box, cigar tube, and wine bottle, indicating that Yu Lian could take them himself. I can't believe you're not a serious person with thick eyebrows and big eyes, girl. I don't have any more excitement, it's not good for this taste, the girl said again. Who would want it? And it seems like it's already common to hear that more stimulating tone from you. Miss Sargent knew she had made a mistake and turned her head to one side. With the corner of her eye, she saw Yu Lian staring blankly at the silver metal tube on the hanger. Her cheeks twitched involuntarily. She had finally obtained this thing and had not yet had a chance to enjoy it. But if the life-saving benefactor wants it, she can't say she won't give it. Green Court Bay torpedoes. They've been out of production for 30 years. Discontinued production. Didn't they still be named the top 10 cigars in the galaxy last year? No, when I didn't say it. Yu Lian trembled slightly as he held the metal tube, which seemed like a small torpedo, and was filled with emotions for a moment. In the end, it's not entirely a bad thing to suddenly jump to 50 years ago. You should know that since the Green Court Bay tobacco plantation on the planet of abundance was destroyed by orbital bombing, this famous cigar from the universe has become an unattainable collectible. The big shots of the community believed that luxury goods such as high-end cigars could create more value and also stand out in the face of civilization across the galaxy, so they shut down metallurgical, chemical, energy enterprises, and arms factories for the people of Earth. However, it has been proven that a single intimidating bombing by a small destroyer completely destroyed a luxury brand that has been famous in the universe for over 100 years. It's really ironic. Yu Lian pulled out his cigar from the torpedo tube and decided to taste it seriously. He looked up and wanted to ask Miss Ina for another fire, but his eyes immediately became straight. He was not mesmerized by the gray and pretty face, but saw a black shadow leaping from behind her. The Thorn Snake King, who should have died in the explosion. It did suffer a heavy blow, with half of its body not completely intact. Its shell opened and continuously oozed a brownish-yellow fluid. However, there were already unfolded membranes on both sides of its abdomen, emitting a faint blue light. It is about to evolve and already possesses the ability of basic energy like shields. This is the reason why it was able to escape the heavens under the explosion. Even after being severely injured, the movements of the Thorn Snake King continued to weaken, approaching a point where normal human vision could not grasp them. This elite unit of alien insects not only serves as a wartime squad leader, but also often plays the role of an assassin. However, Yu Lian was able to clearly capture all the movements of the other person, as if taking a slow camera, even able to see the natural patterns formed by every shell on its snake head, every blade-like tooth in its bloody mouth, and 6 insect blades popping out of its belly roll. But seeing clearly doesn't mean you can do anything. Yu Lian felt that all his blood vessels and nerves were filled with liquid lead, and even a slight movement was impossible. However, the Thorn Snake King had already raised his insect blade towards Ina's unprepared back of the head, but it was only then that the Sergeant Miss had just shown a surprised expression, showing no response. Ina Nishika, will the Scorching Witch die here? The greatest sniper in the history of the galactic civilization, whose prey ranges from Imperial Lords and Alliance Tycoons to the legendary Titan beasts, will die prematurely before stepping out of his novice village. What will happen to the young people on Earth who have embarked on the path of resistance due to your existence in the future? What about your over 100 short videos that teach everyone how to make light spears, cannons, and militia training using local methods? So, is it because of the existence of me, the reborn one? The butterfly effect. In an instant, the red, green, black, purple, and yellow surged into Yu Lian's throat once again, but this time, they did not stop. However, what gushed out was not something difficult to describe, but a ripple-like shock wave that slid over the shoulder of the military chief and hit the face of the Thorn Snake King head-on. So, I'm also a sensitive person. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. This is a trap. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. This is a trap. The movements of the Thorn Snake King can be so fast that ordinary people cannot see clearly. If it has already raised its sword, even if you shoot at close range first, it cannot stop it from killing. However, at this moment, the Snake King's sharp blade had only swung halfway, and the invisible beam shockwave hit its face. But only a muffled bang was heard, and the Snake King flew backwards like a 4-legged snake slapped in the face by a fly. Spiritual impact. So, am I also a sensitive person? That is to say, the insect's target is not Ina, but the two of us. Yu Lian felt that this short moment seemed like a lot had happened, but others saw it as just a short moment. In the blink of an eye, they vaguely saw a black figure emerge from the churning soil, and then with a snap, the black figure was thrown out and fell into the crowd. It wasn't until then that everyone finally saw what that thing was. It was like a super large lizard, with a tail that was over 2 meters long, covered in a shell on its back, and its shell was prickly like a sharp thorn. Two thin films, like bat wings, half open and half closed, flowing with a faint light. The monster lay on the ground, half tilted up and revealing its chest and abdomen, revealing another ferocious mouth full of fine hooks and thorns. Two huge mouths let out a threatening howl together. It was indeed stunned by the sudden spiritual impact, but it did not die. Simply put, psionic shock is one of the most basic and popular skills, and its power depends entirely on the user. Lieutenant Monsun lifted the chainsaw sword and pounced with the monster. He didn't see clearly what had just happened, but only saw the enemy appear. At this moment, the greasy middle-aged man who worked hard to make a living once again disappeared, and the space-age swordsman persona was once again launched. His sword momentum was like thunder, but his sword path was quite stable, accurately targeting the Snake King's waist and abdomen, but he did not have the refreshing feeling of chopping monsters and vegetables as before. This monster with lower intelligence has regained a bit of its spirit and knows how to dodge with force. At the critical moment, it forcefully contracted its body and bounced back. However, even so, its vital waist and abdomen were still torn open, and it was thrown backwards by the kinetic energy of the chainsaw sword, then fell into the crowd with a loud sound. The power of the bear. Sergeant Baka roared in the dialect of the bears, which no one understood, and his axe landed on the face of the Snake King. Ahem. Black Sergeant Yu also let out a meaningless roar, lifting a power hammer and pounding hard. Okay, this time it's the familiar scene of playing rice cake again, and not just the two of them, several soldiers also came up with weapons. With a crackling sound of swords and knives, blood and flesh flew everywhere. Yu Lian sighed heavily with lingering palpitations, and then naturally made contact with Ina's gaze. This girl is closest, and of course, she has also seen the entire journey, including the fleeting airflow ripple just now. She still feels like her cheeks have been scraped by a knife, burning and painful. So, besides being startled and uncertain, there was also an obvious curiosity in his eyes. Don't guess, I should be a sensitive person. But I really don't want to go down this path of idealistic fools no return. Miss Sargent immediately showed a contemptuous look, probably like our disdain for the kind of, why are my parents so wealthy? I want to fight for myself, I want to live an ordinary life. I'm telling the truth, and besides, actually. Forget it. Yu Lian looked at the cigar that had been subconsciously flattened by himself, feeling so painful that he wanted to smoke it. He shouted to the group of people who were still smashing rice cakes, "Stop knocking, that guy might have something in his stomach." Lieutenant Monsun was slightly taken aback, then rushed over and cleared the crowd as if he had wound himself up. He took out a dagger and skillfully sliced open the Snake King's body, which had been almost widened several times by the impact. He dug it out left and touched it right. His hand paused and his movements became more cautious. The lieutenant slowly stood up and spread out his palm, inside which lay 3 transparent crystals the size of a thumb, black, green, and orange-yellow. This obsidian crystal, and its purity is so high. The lieutenant's face flashed with ecstasy, and then he thought of something. He looked at Yu Lian in confusion, but how do you know? I also want to know why you are so skilled. Even if you are a soldier, why are all the key points for appraisal skills full? This, isn't it all for the sake of making a living? The lieutenant laughed heartily and worldly, and the reputation of a swordsman was once again taken offline. But he was still eagerly waiting for an explanation. This thing just emitted light, which is a type of energy shield ability, indicating that it has goods in its body and is highly likely to be the zero element that naturally generates energy. So far, among all known zero-element crystals, the one that combines best with living organisms is obsidian. In addition to being used as an energy source, this thing is also popular as jewelry with slight processing, and it is still very easy to sell. Of course, Yu Lian had already figured out how to explain. The lieutenant suddenly realized and then hesitated, did you also learn this on campus? There are naturally records in the library, Yu Lian said. You lunar beings are indeed monsters. Lieutenant Monsun muttered and casually stuffed obsidian into his storage compartment. Don't worry, I won't miss your share after taking action. I'm not worried about this, I feel like you're quite particular about it. Besides, if I really want to take action, I might have more connections than you do. For example, there is already one stationed in Toulon port. Oh, Toulon, hiss. Yu Lian pressed on his temples, feeling as if his huge 6-yang head was about to explode. Just now, I didn't think it was urgent to survive because it was a worm mouth, but now, I feel that all the pain accumulated just now has burst out in one go. In addition, the burst of red, black, green, purple, and yellow, although not surging out, actually caused a physical burden. Yu Lian felt all kinds of pain and dizziness rushing towards his soul from all directions like an avalanche, about to bury the last bit of remaining rationality. He let out a dry vomit and his eyes were lost and shaky. Lieutenant Belinda. Ina shouted loudly to the little nurse. Can't you come back? Lieutenant Monsun still felt like his own pot, standing there at a loss. Stop, painkillers. The little nurse rushed over and hastily pulled out the needle that was as thick as her arm. Don't. Yu Lian stopped Belinda. This thing has side effects, and he really doesn't trust this girl's craftsmanship. Sir, Lieutenant Monsun, I have something to say. Pain returns to pain, dizziness returns to dizziness, but it is precisely because the memories of the two individuals overlap that his thoughts are now clearer than ever before. He said in a deep voice, it's not advisable to stay here for a long time. How many times have you said this today? The lieutenant quickly comforted and said, Lieutenant, don't worry, you need to rest first. Yes, we are safe now, you need to rest and recover your strength. Leave everything else to me. Sleep, our moon child. Don't worry, we'll be at the base as soon as you wake up. We cannot return to the base. Don't worry, our base will not be attacked outside. We have walked more than half of the way now, and there is less than a day's journey from the port of Toulon. We must go to Toulon immediately, and never return to the military station. Well, Brigadier General, everyone is very tired, and most of the ammunition supplies have been depleted. You are in the same situation now. Shut up. Listen to me. Shut up, and then listen to me. I'm listening, Lieutenant said helplessly, it's starting. It's finally starting. It's starting. It's starting. If you moon people don't grab power, I'll be blamed. I've been waiting for a long time. He squeezed out a slightly stiff, spoiled apology smile. Don't you understand? Why is our convoy being attacked? Why are the insects attacking us different every time? The key is, why do they come back time and time instead of just thinking? This is a test. Sir, test the biological weapons. Yes, in the later Toulon port incident, I have never heard of the movements of the alien insects, and the future celebrity Miss Ina has never mentioned them either. In fact, it was 2 years later that the swarm of insects truly caught the attention of governments across the galaxy. Yu Lian doesn't know if it's because of his butterfly effect that the insects that shouldn't have come, or if they have changed their original attack targets, but this is not important, at least not for now. Importantly, what can be determined by later history is that the earliest insect populations emerged in this small batch. Caravans, pedestrians, patrol soldiers, as well as farms and small towns, are all their targets of attack, but they seem to have little organization and are simply a group of aimless and brainless beasts. No, wild beasts are smarter than them. At least they attack to fill their stomachs, not just for killing. It wasn't until the insect swarm became a natural disaster that everyone finally realized it. Their purpose has always been clear. First, to collect genetic diversity. Every blood and flesh consumed by an individual alien insect can upload its genetic information to the shared life database of the insect population. This is the true swarm thinking of, I am for everyone is for me. Secondly, it is to test the combat effectiveness of the new species of insect populations. Engage opponents of different types and combat capabilities, analyze the enemy's weaknesses and strengths. Of course, more importantly, indecent development cannot be tolerated. So, before the time is ripe, we must not attack and defend cities with complete population density. Moreover, the most important thing is either not to do it or to do it absolutely. So, they will continue to attack this team of 20 people, and there is no reason to let go of a small soldier station with more than twice the number of people. The safest place now is actually Toulon, which seems to be about to be besieged by the Sand Army. This is a trap, he roared. However, this exhausted his last physical strength. With a soft hand, he loosened his grip on the lieutenant's collar and lost consciousness. Everyone looked at each other in confusion. Sir, we. Miss Belinda looked at Lieutenant Monson for help. The lieutenant hesitated for a few seconds, but still waved his hand too hard and said, Go back. Go back to base. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. My first half of life. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. My first half of life. The giant creature crawling on the asteroid has awakened, lifted its slender and elegant neck, and slowly opened its eyes. In that eye socket, there were no distinct pupils visible, as if they were two indestructible stars. The halo of the stars brushed against the pitch-black scales, as if it had transformed into a brilliant Milky Way, flowing within its majestic body. He propped up half of his body, spread out his armor wings that covered the sky and sun, and stood proudly surrounded by the stars. He does have such capital, because with his magnificent dragon scales alone, he can withstand a fleet's volley as if nothing had happened. Even the main gun of a Titan is difficult to break through its protection. In front of such a giant object, driving a badge machine, carrying a photon spear and a dawn sword, the remaining unit is as small as ants, no, bacteria. But since it is bacteria, it should be directly ignored. But he still stared at himself, motionless. He seemed to let out a sneer, but in the universe, the sound could not be transmitted at all. However, Yu Lian could only feel the other person's sneer, which was already undisguised disdain. He casually opened his mouth, and gamma rays began to converge into speed, which was a powerful force that could burn the surface of an entire terrestrial planet into crystals. Yu Lian knew that he had no way to avoid it and could not stop it at all. He could only wait for the arrival of death. Being blasted to death by the gamma ray that extinguished the star rating, as a traveler, is also considered a quite magnificent ending, right? This stage is too early for you, someone vaguely seemed to be saying to themselves. Go find me, the voice said again. Why are we looking for you? Although I don't hate psychics, I hate you guys who are so talkative the most. So, an incurable idealistic fool. Yu Lian really wanted to laugh, so he laughed out loud like this. So, the king of the stars and dragons who covered the Milky Way, the gamma rays that destroyed the heavens and earth, the voice of that god's chatter, and the figure that appeared faintly after the endless void disappeared. His smile turned into a violent cough, and then he woke up from it. The first thing he saw was the soothing blue light emanating from the ceiling. I don't know the ceiling. Well, I actually know it. This is the 12th Ordnance Station of the New Human Star Ground Defense Guard, located over 100 kilometers from the colonial capital, Port Toulon. The main function is to ensure the monitoring of the wilderness by the colonial governor's office, as well as to provide protection for surrounding plantations and mines. Of course, it's just a theory. The development time of this colonial planet is still short, and the total number of citizens in the community and other countries of the galaxy is less than 700,000, of which 650,000 live in the city of Toulon. It can be imagined how vast and sparsely populated the wilderness is. It is even more imaginable what kind of people dare to open plantations and mines in such places. Gun-armed mobs are all light, and perhaps their equipment is better than that of the miscellaneous fish in the police force. Moreover, the local indigenous San people here are generally quite obedient and willing to work in farms and mines owned by earthlings. A small number of rebellious outlaws are not considered serious threats. At least in the past few decades, both the central government and the governor's office of the community believed so. As for me, Yu Lian was a bit confused, feeling the clearer and clearer memories. For a moment, I didn't know whether it was the later generation of the ranger Yu Lian who went up and took away the residence of the military academy student Yu Lian, or whether the military academy student Yu Lian had obtained the memories of the later generation of the ranger Yu Lian. He slowly propped up his body, saw the mirror on the wall, and saw his own face. That was a young, delicate, and handsome face, and even if she debuted immediately, she wouldn't show any fear. On the contrary, she was half as handsome as her previous life. This is great, and observers outside the universe will also have a greater sense of immersion. Of course, I just feel a bit younger than my real age, like a rookie who hasn't been beaten by society. Moreover, overall, the facial features and body shape are a bit weak, but fortunately they haven't reached the level of a mother, probably because they haven't left bangs. Of course, this type of boy can be easily influenced if he has a more gentle personality, but if he is a pure man in his bones, perhaps with a little effort, he can still follow the path of a white horse, silver spear, and jade-faced young man. Overall, compared to the pirate face from the previous life, he does look more like a protagonist. Okay, starting from today, I'm Yu Lian. I am just Yu Lian, born on September 17, 808 in the galactic calendar, and grew up in an inland city on Earth, the capital of the Blue Star community. My parents passed away early, but I still left some inheritance for myself. Moreover, the uncles and aunts who raised me are also good people. I treat myself as if I had left, and my younger brother and sister are also very cute. I have been a child of someone else's family since I was young, but after all, I grew up in a restaurant on a food street and couldn't get any recommendations from big shots, let alone any fancy vacation internship resumes. Naturally, I couldn't apply for scholarships from prestigious universities. However, the high tuition fees in higher education institutions are not something that ordinary families can easily afford immediately. If you want to enroll, either sell the property left by your parents or carry a heavy student loan. Uncle and aunt wanted to take out their savings, but Yu Lian didn't accept it. I am at least an adult and must take responsibility for my future. Besides, won't my younger siblings use money in the future? So, are you prepared to exchange your entire life for a student loan? Or sell the house? Is it better not to go to college and work? In the end, you didn't even choose anything. Then, under the instigation of the childhood sweetheart of the daughter of the Daoguan family across from the restaurant, they both applied to Central Defense University and passed the exam together, leaving behind once again an overly glamorous figure in the legend of someone else's child. Military academies are free, as long as you are willing to stay in the military and serve after graduation. Then, it was the year approaching graduation. As the pillars of the future community army, graduating students have an obligation to intern in various departments of the military for a period of time. On the one hand, they collect materials for their papers, and on the other hand, they also want to get started quickly. The Lunar Military Academy has always had such a tradition, and it is indeed considered a fine tradition. However, the most elite strategic research student in the prestigious Super Academy was thrown into a small soldier station of the Colonial Guard, which was a bit confusing. Okay, it seems like this kid. I have a nodding iron, and I am a mortal enemy of the traditional school bully organization, Blue Blood Brotherhood, that has been entrenched in the Moon Military Academy for decades. Moreover, it seems that he has offended the school authorities for helping a few students who have been unjustly punished, and even confronted the principal and the head of the instructor department in person. Well done. Just not smart enough, it's still too young. The ranger Yu Lian expressed his appreciation to the student Yu Lian, but then suddenly realized that it was not the time to think about these things now. Toulon port is about to trigger all the major events that follow, including the siege of 1,000,000 Sand People's army. The reinforcement order from the garrison command, as well as the current situation of Eleanor, who is still in the city. Well, if we follow historical development, Eleanor not only has nothing to do but also will make a big splash, but at least she is also a student who took good care of herself during her student days. It is impossible to say she is not worried. After all, isn't INA's team attacked? The butterfly effect has emerged, and the history of the previous life cannot be accurately predicted. In addition, like in my previous life, I am still a spiritually sensitive person and an incurable idealistic fool. And, more importantly, as I mentioned before fainting, this is a trap. Fool. The mixed fish in the police force are mixed fish. Am I not clear enough? Yu Lian cursed and got off the bed. Now he has recognized himself lying in the medical room of the military station. The wound on the waist and spine has been reprocessed, and at first glance, the craftsmanship is much better than that of Nurse Belinda, who is average in all aspects. He also felt the presence of his body below his waist for the first time after being reborn, but he always felt a bit conflicted. It seems that nanomechanics are operating, but they cannot completely replace the role of natural nerves. Anyway, he can now walk, run, and even fight normally. He helped the bed railing climb down, but stumbled. This movement seemed to make some noise, but the door to the medical room opened and a 30-year-old technical sergeant and Miss Belinda ran in. It's okay, walking down can help your body adapt to the rhythm of nanomechanics as soon as possible. However, be careful. This male technician is quite scholarly and has a broad smile, making him suitable for becoming a doctor at first glance. He is Sergeant Banksy Shazabi, a legitimate military doctor at the 12th Army Station. You are recovering very well now. Sigh, you truly deserve to be a sensitive person's physique. Of course, you can also eat. You give us. Captain. Yu Lian knew it was impolite, but he still ran straight past the doctor and rushed into the cafeteria, which was emitting a fragrance and many people were talking. There are about 10 people sitting in the cafeteria, and even some familiar people are there. Lieutenant Monsun and Baka were sitting at the same table, enjoying their plates. Ina sat at a table herself, with 2 extinguished cigarette butts and 2 empty wine bottles placed next to her empty plate after finishing. Everyone looked at Yu Lian rushing in, a bit confused. His attitude didn't seem like he was here to eat, but rather like he was here to lift the table. Lieutenant Monsun stood up, squeezed out a smile, and applauded, "Ha, our moon people are here." Sergeant Xiongren showed a simple smile, stood up, and began applauding. Everyone applauded, and some even cheered. Yu Lian remembers that when he first took office here, he also had such a ceremony where everyone gathered and applauded to welcome him, but it always felt very routine. But this time, everyone is clearly sincere. "Lieutenant, how do you want your steak cooked?" Yu revealed a face from behind the kitchen counter that was black, rough, and had a rather ugly smile, with a row of big white teeth on his face. Ina took it for granted to pat her desk mate's chair and pointed to another plate filled with beans, broth, cake, and meat sauce noodles. She arranged a plate in a dazzling array. Yu Lian was a bit touched. Human beings are social animals, and being accepted and respected greatly satisfies their psychological needs. If they were to switch to normal life, they would definitely enjoy everything in front of them. However, eat and eat. Eat your bubble teapot. Yu Lian rushed up and swallowed the cake, then ran up to the lieutenant. What about others? Yes, sleeping. Sleep on MB. Hurry up and get all the labor up. Hi. Pick up your weapons, get on the wall. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. The Twisted World. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. The Twisted World. Mechanic. Oh, Uncle Carl, is that you? Go, open up all the sentry guns. What, only half can be used. Then open up all that can be used and put them all in front of the city wall. Sergeant Roar, help you and your people. The elderly military station mechanic Carl and his deputy Roar left confused. Ina, what are you asking them all to climb up to the top for? They're still standing so close. Are you waiting in line to be shot? Cross slope, don't you understand? Sergeant Mark, take your people to the outer wall, carry all your machine guns. And Sergeant Baca, leave the city. Yes, pull a trench for me outside the city. I don't want you to think, I want me to think. If you don't go, I'll go. Yu Lian was furious, almost speechless, and choked on the world that had distorted the technology tree. In his previous life, he had already quit many times, but at that time, he was just a lone ranger with little insight, and his active years were already decades later. In that era, various tactics were finally much more normal after being reformed and revised by the famous generals born out of luck in the Great Era. But now it's still 829, and there are still several years before that big era officially arrives. Sergeant Bear, who was very cruel to the enemy but had a good temper towards his own people, had no objection and left with several strong soldiers carrying tools. Although everyone's tactics are primitive, various handheld construction machinery has a sci-fi appearance and performance, and it is still easy to dig a trench temporarily. Ina, go to the wide-angle sentry over there. You don't need to command those on the city wall. What about the monitor, the communicator, or can't it be used? There has been a slight malfunction since yesterday, 9-star communication, right. Even if a broken company makes some personal terminals, they will explode. How could they still get a military order? TSK, I wish you bankruptcy soon and your whole family can go to the rooftop. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and fix it. If it's not fixed, I'll hang you on the flagpole and generate electricity. Yes, I understand. The messenger was immediately frightened and ran away sweating profusely. Excellent. Yes, Lieutenant, no, sir, I'm here. Where's my steak? The sergeant magically took out a frying pan from behind and ran over with a thud. Yu Lian suddenly realized that the other party was still wearing an apron, and he didn't mind the heat. He snatched the beef and cursed, "Get out. Go put on your armor and come back to help." Everyone felt Yu Lian's anxiety. Everyone knows that Yu Lian is a lunar man, the elite among the elites, with an endless future. Everyone probably already knows that Yu Lian is a psychic sensitive person. So, no matter how much they cursed in their hearts, everyone dared not disobey orders. Haven't you seen Lieutenant Monsun? Didn't the legitimate commander of this station say anything? Although he had a helpless wry smile on his face, look, it's indeed a lunar being. As a lunar being, it would be strange not to arrogantly and recklessly seize the power of a nominal commander. After all, he was still laughing. Actually, the lieutenant is still prepared to say something. He saw Yu Lian hissing the beef in 3 or 2 bites, and at most, there were many blood streaks on the 5 ripe steak. It looked like a cannibal barbarian who drank blood from mushrooms. He couldn't help but tremble for a moment before approaching in a low voice and saying, "I said, Lieutenant, are you a bit? This. After taking a few big bites, you swallowed the half-cooked steak in his stomach. He was really hungry. And said, overreacted. Neuropathic. Victim delusions. Well, actually, that's not what I meant. Of course, it's good to make everyone nervous, let's just treat it as emergency preparedness training. Sir, I have already said that all of this is like a test of a biological weapon. Even if it's just my delusional victim, we can't afford to gamble. But, this. Let's just call everyone up for an emergency preparedness exercise. Oh, by the way, let's drive out the armored vehicles in the garage. Energy pack, this. Is there always a battery to drive them to the city gate? I need those 2 cannons on the roof of the car. Baka and his team digging trenches outside the city gate are the most dangerous, and if necessary, they need to be covered by armored vehicles. The lieutenant hesitated for a moment, but ultimately nodded heavily. He doesn't have any sense of crisis that has been elevated. After all, this small military station is just a transition for the lunar man. When Yu Lian leaves here, he will have the final say. Compared to that, he was quite curious about Yu Lian's arrangement of the city defense. Why deploy troops on the two city walls? Why do people have to set up a trench at the city gate? Why not let everyone line up on the highest inner city wall? Isn't it going further? Also, why are all machine guns placed at both ends of the city walls and trenches, and in the center for greater damage? The 12th military station is built against the mountain, backed by a sturdy rock wall. The front is a gentle slope, leading directly to the vast wilderness below the mountain. There are two high walls on the front, both of which are reinforced concrete structures. The outer wall is 5 meters long, while the inner wall is 8 meters long. In the middle of the two walls is a training ground the size of a garage, security room, and basketball court. Behind the inner wall is the main building of the military station, which includes a barracks, warehouse, medical room, radar room, and command room. On both sides of the city walls, there are a total of 6 quadruple tube-mounted ground and air dual-purpose sentry guns. Of course, only half of them are currently available, which means 3 can be used. It is said that a few years ago, there was also a Typhoon missile vehicle, but it was later removed by the Governor General's office due to cost issues. The reason given is very sufficient. Who are you using missiles to attack? The indigenous people of the desert. Can they fly? In addition, the military station also had a firepower support team equipped with 2-phase particle guns, but they were later withdrawn by the Governor General's office due to cost issues. The reason given is even simpler. It's a waste to hand over high-tech equipment like energy weapons that require highly educated personnel to operate to you. Besides, who are you fighting with? You're fighting against the indigenous San people. They even have houses in mud. Of course, even so, the terrain and defense of this military station are as solid as a fortress. By medieval standards. If the attacking enemy has heavy firepower, no, even at the same level of firepower, they cannot even run. Yu Lian thought. However, at least based on their familiar history, insects, currently, do not have heavy firepower. I hope the butterfly effect of my rebirth won't fan out such a big thing, right? So, what's the purpose of this arrangement? The lieutenant finally couldn't resist and asked curiously, this is the arrangement that can unleash maximum firepower. You just need to learn geometry and ponder it to understand. From elementary school to middle school, I slept through, so I had to barely pass the exam. The scumbag from a wild chicken sports school felt hurt by 10,000 points and didn't want to speak anymore. However, he soon realized that something should be said to a subordinate who was only half his age. He nodded stiffly and said, that makes sense. After thinking about it, this configuration of firepower is indeed foolproof. Alright, Brigadier General, let's consider it as a new battlefield tactical training. I support you. I also really hope it's training. Yu Lian gave the other person a helpless glance. The unbreakable confrontation between the two camps, the discovery of the Stargate, and the development of the new Milky Way, also known as the Andromeda Galaxy, seemed to have ushered the entire galaxy into the best era of progress. However, no one knows whether those new warships and weapons, those massive armies, and those spiritual warriors crossing the galaxy are truly suitable for full-scale war. Even the fleet battles within the Milky Way have been led into the evil ways of bow-to-bow confrontation, sudden dog fights, and gang fights. What about ground battles? Both sides were wearing powered skeletons, surrounding their respective heavy firepower units, forming scattered lines while shooting and approaching each other. Then, they approached and charged forward with knives to start a fight. Yes. Before crossing over, whether it was a Star Wars or anime, or even powerful silicon-based intelligent mechanical life forms from beyond the Milky Way, they fought like this. Perhaps this is how the universe age came to meet everyone's aesthetic standards. So, what kind of crossfire, what kind of oblique layout, are all outdated positional warfare tactics from the 20th century, yet they are still considered new things in the space age. Indeed, in theory, the crossfire of 2 heavy machine guns can block a frontal battlefield of 500 meters. Moreover, I not only have heavy machine guns, but also 3 machine guns that can bombard armored vehicles, and I have also arranged oblique firepower according to the terrain. In theory, if the other party still comes with insects such as jumping insects, prickling snakes, and warriors, Yu Lian does have the confidence to lead everyone to hold on, and even hold on to the port of Toulon without any problem. However, this idea has long been outdated. Although the technology tree and war studies of known civilizations in the entire universe are somewhat distorted now, they at least understand that the battlefield is never flat. Many civilizations even learn to utilize the sky as early as the cold weapon era of their home planet. Insects, of course they do. Captain. There's a target approaching in the sky. Ina's voice came from the highest sentinel turret. Yu Lian looked at the distant sky, but couldn't see clearly under the scorching sun. On the barren wilderness, one can only vaguely see the smoke and dust on the horizon. However, he still firmly believed in Ina's judgment. Compared to the radar and detectors produced by 12-star communications, the vision of a future interstellar sniper is more trustworthy, even if she has not yet awakened or even realized that she is also a sensitive person. Prepare for battle. Yu Lianli naturally crossed over the lieutenant and gave orders to everyone, then said, "Give me a set of armor." The so-called A is certainly an exoskeleton, and Yu Lian remembers that there are still 7 or 8 sets of spare ones in the arsenal. If these batteries are also sold, Yu Lian will decide to blow up the lieutenant's dog head with one shot now. Then it was reported that he was taken away by Husky. Fortunately, the lieutenant stated that the spare power bones were still intact, but he also said, "But, Lieutenant, your spine is broken. Now that you can move, it all depends on that tube of nanobugs, and you can't open the exoskeleton armor. Then take out all the bones and replace them for everyone. How many can you put on?" Well, Power A belongs directly to the Governor General's office, and we theoretically do not have the right to transfer it. Moreover, most people here do not have a license at all. If they drive it and encounter a collision, it will be difficult to report back. Yu Lianshuan snatched a rifle from a passing soldier and viciously attacked a magazine. Lieutenant Monsun shook his spirits and chuckled, I'm going. He then fled in despair. Yu Lianxiang suppressed the urge to shoot him in the butt, then grabbed the bewildered private who had been robbed of his gun and said, "Follow me to the wall, you become my loader." End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Line of Fire Defense. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Line of Fire Defense. The group of goods present, although often referred to as miscellaneous fish of the security team, are still regular members of the community, and their basic qualities are still present. Although the soldiers were full of slander, they still carried out their previous orders. Yu Lian is quite satisfied, and among all the military organizations he has seen, their quality is not at least the bottom. So, 1 minute after Ina issued the warning, everyone was in their designated tactical positions. At this moment, Yu Lian also climbed to a sentry gun on the outer city wall and checked the overly primitive operating system. It's like shaking hands, there's no fire control either. The intersection of primitive and future, the core of classicism and conservatism hidden under the magnificent waves of the starry sea, is full of such a splendid and wonderful world. This is the authentic style of space opera, right? Yu Lian sighed and pressed a whole box of steel nail shells into the magazine. At this moment, under the scorching sun, most people finally saw the black spots emerging after the turbid heat wave. The soldiers let out a brief commotion, but stopped at the urging of Lieutenant Monsun and Ina. Sure enough. Yu Lian sighed and stared intently at the approaching black spots, searching for the smaller but more threatening targets. Long, sir, I'll survive, right? Yu Lian heard a trembling voice behind him and glanced with his spare light. He saw a young private about his age, carrying a gun and holding an ammunition box tightly in his hands, as if it could give him a sense of security. It seems like the loader of this machine gun. What's his name? I'll do my best. You also need to protect yourself, don't forget even what you learned in the new barracks. The other person seemed to be trembling even more, like a stray puppy with a hopeful expression. Yu Lian knew what he wanted to say, but he couldn't say such irresponsible words as, I will definitely make each of you live. At this point, the black spots on the horizon had already expanded tenfold in sight. Everyone finally saw the figures of those things. It was like a large legless centipede with huge bat wings, with 4 barbed spines distributed on its head. A pair of large mouths occupied more than half of the entire head, and its entire body was covered with rugged shells. Even the insect's belly, which should be its weakness, was tightly covered. Dragon insect. TSK, as long as you haven't evolved, you're just junior brothers. The key is to be afraid of exploding mosquitoes. Well, fortunately, there shouldn't be any now. Yu Lian knew that even the invincible titans cruising through the Milky Way would be at a loss when those tiny things that were only sparrows swept over like locusts. The dragons and insects were getting closer and closer, emitting a piercing sound, as if the female demon was howling. Yu Lian looked at the soldiers who had already raised their weapons one after another, and with a corner of his eye, he glanced at Private Bunenji, who continued to tremble while holding the ammunition box. Finally, he made a gesture to Aina on the other side of the tower. He believed that Aina could definitely see it. He then turned his attention to the oncoming enemy. The sentry gun he operates has no fire control or rangefinder, and he still uses a hand-cranked one. If there is anything better than a real dense formation, it is very impressive. The marksman's ability is also very heroic, which is quite in line with the 3 views of the universe he is in. At this point, he could only judge the best timing for firing with his naked eye. Fortunately, I have accumulated a lot of experience in this area in my past life. 2000, 1500. 1200, Yu Lian silently judged the distance of the other person in his heart, and their roar grew louder and louder. The 4 barbed mouthparts in the center have already opened, and the blade worms slowly emerging inside cannot be seen clearly, but they also emit a trembling sense of oppression. Ahem. Mom, Mom. The loader let out a mournful cry. So why did you come to join the army? Yu Lian wanted to sympathize with the other party, but couldn't sympathize at all. He pulled down the joystick with force. The firepower woven into it was like a whip of light swung from the air, directly cutting through the head of a dragon beetle and cutting it open at the same time as the blade beetle that had already crawled to its mouth. And almost at the same moment, Aina also fired. This time, she finally didn't use 3 shots, but tightened the joystick and fired more than 10 shells in an instant, sweeping across and immediately sweeping down the 3 insect dragons. Well, Yu Lian must admit that even if he really installed fire control radar, he probably wouldn't be able to achieve such a record. This is the most magical yet charming aspect of this world. A natural sniper, but also a natural gunner. It's natural for her to eventually awaken to Star Hunter. Or, in other words, there is no way more suitable for her than Star Hunter. The remaining sentry guns also fired, and this time they were not as accurate, but at least they could form barrage to limit the enemy's movement trajectory. Yu Lian is actually not very satisfied. Truly well-trained gunners also use hand-cranked anti-aircraft guns, but they can also form dense firepower coordination in space warfare. Even when facing the emblem machine driven by a high-level awakener, it can still suppress the enemy into a narrow space until it completely tears them apart. The elite troops of the Empire and the Alliance can do it, back then. When he was still a young man in his previous life, the unit he joined could also do it. Time flies, it's truly heartbreaking. It's probably difficult to transition from luxury to frugality. Yu Lian has served in the most elite troops and fought against the strongest enemies, so he naturally doesn't like his current teammates in every way. However, no matter what, the security soldiers are still working hard to shoot and do their best to prevent those flying monsters from approaching. And the soldiers who were stationed on the city walls and trenches were also preparing to join the shooting, but were stopped by their respective sergeants, which was of course arranged by Yu Company in advance. Lieutenant Monsun appeared in the trench outside the city wall at some point, holding his beloved chainsaw sword and his rifle in front of him, smoking a cigarette in a muffled manner. He is considering how much of the spoils of war he just received should be distributed to that lunar man in order for him to exchange some good words in front of Captain Bonaparte. "Sir, look ahead!" Sergeant Yu shouted from the outer wall. "I saw it, I came when I came." The lieutenant continued to smoke silently, witnessing the sudden rise of smoke and dust growing stronger in his own sight. Until he could clearly see the monster in the smoke and dust. There are smaller monsters like clawed hyenas and crustacean cobras, as well as later monsters like octopuses that should be more powerful. The colonies of Xinyamen have been established for decades, and I wonder if there is such a thing in this place. What kind of genius masters are the intelligence agencies? Well, it seems that the old men above do indeed eat dry meals. The only thing they learn is to eat supper with ding-ding. The lieutenant took a big gulp of the remaining half of the smoky cigarette and flicked the cigarette butt towards the insect swarm in front of him. He expressionlessly raised his rifle. A 3-shot with almost perfect rhythm. Lieutenant Monsun said that although I haven't read much, I am still willing to learn. Since that moon boy fired like this, it must be a shooting technique mastered by some elite unit. After a blink of an eye, the steel nail bullet crossed a distance of over 300 meters and immediately shattered the center of a terrifying claw beetle. The soldiers in the trench cheered loudly for the lieutenant's divine shot, and the lieutenant's face turned pale, but he felt a bit embarrassed inside. He actually aimed at the nearby cobra. As a veteran, meow, I don't know why this is also harmonious, thug, Mr. Monsun actually has a lot of self-awareness and doesn't think he can hit the key point of that octopus spider so far. Well, didn't that moon man say so? The key to that monster is the center of its two large claws. That place is even smaller than a person's head. Anyway, Lieutenant Monsun's divine shot boosted everyone's morale, and the soldiers opened fire one after another. The sentry guns and a 3-layer sloping firepower position form an almost impenetrable interception fire net, forming an almost insurmountable firepower barrier on the gentle slope of the military station. But I saw a barrage of bullets flying and dust flying, with insect limbs and body fluids splashing everywhere, and no fish caught could cross that dead line. The mournful cry showed no pain, but there was a faint hint of impatience and exhaustion. If we follow the usual firepower configuration, they may have already rushed in front of us, right? The lieutenant couldn't help but think so. He felt that his chainsaw blade was a bit hungry and thirsty, but he also felt that this was enough and there was no need to take any more risks. Lunar man, truly worthy of being a lunar man. And on this side of the sky, with Aina as the divine marksman, the hand-cranked air cannon also achieved a fairly accurate hit rate. After all, the current dragon worms are still the first batch of experimental objects, far from the multiple improved versions of Sha Xing that can withstand battleship particle guns and honeycomb missiles in the universe. Once hit by 20mm high-carbon steel nail shells, they will still lose their combat effectiveness. Quickly, both on the ground and in the air, more than half of the alien insects were killed, or their bones and tendons were broken and they were dying. Private Bunenji, who was hiding behind the turret, stopped calling out for his mother and stared at the back of Yu Lian on the gun position, without hiding his blatant admiration. He looked through the entire process and knew who had just arranged the defense line. "Load the bomb!" Yu Lian shouted loudly. It took almost a second for the little private to react, quickly and frantically pulling open the bomb compartment below the turret, pulling out the empty box inside, and stuffing the box filled with steel nails into it. Others are becoming more and more relaxed, but Yu Lian is still very nervous. He doesn't think the other party only has a few brushes. Since we are going to silence, how can we not achieve the utmost? They probably haven't pointed out the technology tree that exploded mosquitoes yet, but at least there are dragon insects. So, would it be as soon as he thought of this, Yu Lian felt a tightness in his heart, as if he was shrouded in a dark cloud above his head. He immediately realized that this was not something as if, but something that was indeed happening. A giant creature that was 7 or 8 times similar to those dragon insects, but over 10 meters long, appeared from the direction of the zenith and silently pounced upon it, only 100 meters away from everyone. End of this chapter.